So I'm going to welcome Jacob Greenberg to talk about AI and spine. Kind of a newer topic, means a lot of different things, but I think it's going to become increasingly important for all of us as we continue. So thanks, Jacob.
Thank you, Matt, Zach, the rest of the program committee. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to just try to give a bit of an overview on different applications of AI in your spine practice. Definitely not meant to be all-encompassing. Really no particularly relevant disclosures. And so I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of different areas. So kind of talk about what AI is. I'm going to try to spend most of the time actually talking about where we can use AI outside the operating room, which is where I think many of us spend less time thinking about. AI's role in perioperative care, where I think it probably comes to mind more readily. Some potential pitfalls and just a few parting thoughts. So what is AI? This is a little bit of a stupid question, but I don't actually think many of us spend much time answering this. And so it's the fundamental idea that we can use technology to help computers to reason, learn, or act in some way that mimics how we think as humans. And then we use terms like machine learning to basically define where computers are able to do that in a way that they're not explicitly told exactly what to do. I think most of the more exciting applications of AI tend to fall within this realm of deep learning, which fundamentally boils down to the architecture, the computer architecture of using neural networks to be able to identify more complex patterns that you just can't do in more simplistic ways. And then I think we're obviously probably most excited about large language models, which are really a subset of deep learning models that are specifically designed to mimic human language. And they can obviously do a lot of exciting things because of that. So again, I'll spend most of the time here talking about AI outside the operating room. And I would argue that probably the lowest hanging fruit that anyone who's doing scientific research should be taking advantage of is using AI for your research. Now, this could be a double-edged sword, and I certainly don't mean to imply that AI should be doing your research, should be writing your grants and submitting them. And if you've sort of had your eyes open to this, there's been a lot of controversy around that. But I think there are plenty of very above-board applications where AI can be extremely useful. So to me, using something like Claude or potentially ChatGPT is dramatically more efficient if I'm trying to answer a question than Google Scholar or PubMed. I can just write in free text what I want to know, and with some back and forth, it will help find that answer. When you're writing a grant, I would say it's probably not best to ask a large language model to write that grant, at least in my experience, just trying to see what they come up with. It's not really that good, but it's really good to help you revise and edit, right? So if you're like, well, here's the sort of analysis that I want to do, what sort of models should I do? And you go back and forth, that can be a really efficient way to improve a grant or use it to edit it. And then disseminate your research. So this is something that I, in full disclosure, I've not done a lot of, and actually just tried this out for the first time this past week, because AI can actually help package your research in a way that can help it make it more palatable for broader dissemination. And so, for example, here's, let's see if this works. I don't know, is there a mouse? Oh, sad. All right, well, this may not work, but the idea here is, there's other platforms that can do this, but NotebookLM is one sort of widely available, free, but with subscription model service where you can plug something in. Like here's a PDF of a paper we just had accepted, and it will make a very engaging, very intuitive video geared for lay people to understand what you've come up with. And I think that's a really attractive opportunity, which we don't really think about. We just sort of say, hey, I published this paper. But if you actually ever wanted a patient of yours to say, hey, Dr. So-and-so has actually done something that finds interesting, they're never going to read the PDF, or 99% of my patients are not going to, but they might look at this video and say, oh, that's actually pretty cool, and get some interest in that. Likewise, I think AI can have very similar roles in helping you, do marketing within your practice. So packaging materials for broader dissemination, I think, is very similar to how you want to package your research for broader dissemination. And I think the same way that AI can do this for your research, you can definitely do it for your clinical practice. And then things like helping with efficiencies of sending letters for providers. I mean, really anything where you need to make your communication more efficient, I think, is a great opportunity. And there are ways to do this. There are some challenges, as I'll get to at the end, in terms of privacy issues, and those in many ways are probably the biggest drawback rather than the actual technological capabilities. So here again, I don't think this is going to work, unfortunately, but this is a video. So we had created some handouts a few years ago. One of them was on ACDF, and the idea was we're going to give these to patients. And then we just kind of never really did anything with it, and they're on our website somewhere, and I'm sure no one clicked on it. And then I just plugged it into Notebook LM. It actually creates a great video where it's really intuitive, very common sense explanation of the information from the sheet that was intended to be for lay people, but adds additional dimensions that, again, this took 5 minutes. So I think that's a great opportunity. Let's see. And then patient communication. So this is something where I know we don't have this capability at my hospital. I think Epic has it built in, but you can use AI-generated replies. There have been studies on this. Shockingly, ChatGPT is actually more empathetic than most of us are, and the quality of the replies are higher. So I actually wasn't that surprised, but this actually could be worthwhile if you get past the regulatory concerns. And then probably the area that many of us, or the most of us may be using is AI scribes. So my hospital has a bridge, there's others, and I don't find these perfect in all honesty. It's probably one of the less attractive applications to me, but I do think it has a role, and certainly there's objective evidence it can decrease documentation time, burnout, et cetera. And so, in the perioperative setting, I think this is where we think the most about AI, and especially in lumbar spine surgery, a lot of, what we initially did was extremely manual, like building a wooden box or something. It's really the same thing. Maybe we have x-rays. Right now, we're kind of in this era of navigation and robotics. And I think AI is helping us today, but certainly there's opportunities for it to do a lot more. So today, we use AI in our segmentation, fluoroscopy-based merges, really rely on that, robotics-based screw planning, trajectory planning, alignment tracking. But I think that that's really fairly simplistic for many of these applications, and I think the opportunities are only going to grow. Verifying placement of instrumentation, automating bone cutting, improving our intraoperative guidance, and then probably even more importantly is planning better surgeries in the first place. So right now, I would argue that it's still a very manual process, even though there are companies who technically have prediction models for things like thoracic compensation. I would argue they're fairly primitive because we basically just rely simply on geometry that's good but not perfect, and we don't account for things like compensatory changes very well, bone health, muscle health, body habitus, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for AI if we had enough information and good data to deliver it. Patient selection, I think, is probably the ultimate goal. This is an incredibly hard problem, and honestly, whether we will solve this in a, I wouldn't even say perfect, but really good way, I don't know. But certainly, I think if we're going to get closer, it's not going to be with more data per se, but it's going to be with more diverse data and better data. So I think wearables have a role in that, looking at actual physiologic and functional activity, blood-based biomarkers, detailed imaging measurements, patient-reported outcomes in different forms. AI can do this. I mean, almost definitively, AI can do this today, but we don't give it nearly enough of the right data. And then postoperative monitoring. So this is a viable thing to do today. Probably most of us don't take advantage of electronic monitoring, mostly because it takes time. You get some alert that you don't know what to do with. You can get reimbursed, but the reimbursement's pretty poor, and so it's sort of a poor value proposition. And there's not really good evidence it improves outcome. But certainly, if this is something that we can automate through AI, I think there's a real opportunity there. And then there's lots of other opportunities that I'm not going to go into, whether it's neuromonitoring, hemodynamic monitoring, but certainly I think a variety of other opportunities. But, there's a variety of shortcomings. A lot of it has to do with the data you put in, which is probably our biggest limitation. There still are issues with the models themselves, like hallucinations, distribution shifts, so whether a model, trained here in, the Midwest is going to work on the West Coast, privacy and regulatory concerns. But I think nonetheless, there are a lot of opportunities. And so, my biggest takeaways would be do something. Just look for the opportunities that make the most sense for you. Try something. Don't trust it blindly. Collect good data so we can have better models. And then figure out where you can make a contribution, whether it's your own personal practice, contributing at a national level, et cetera. So thank you again, and appreciate the opportunity.